This is your fault. Everything that has happened is because of your incompetence.
He threatened his son's art therapist in his corner office, and she spread the drawings across his desk, stood close enough to shake him, and refused to let him run from what they revealed. Before we dive into the story, take a moment and tell us where you're watching from. It helps new viewers find stories like this. The 53rd floor of the Whitmore Tower in Manhattan's financial district held the kind of silence that only extreme wealth could purchase. Alexander Grant Whitmore's office occupied the entire southwestern corner, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Hudson River like an expensive painting. At 4:15 on a Tuesday afternoon in October, autumn lights landed through the glass, turning everything it touched to amber and shadow. Iris Caitlin Shaw had never been in a space this aggressively minimalist. Chrome and glass everywhere, not a personal photograph in sight. The desk alone probably cost more than her annual salary at the Riverside Children's Therapy Center. She stood in the reception area outside his office, her worn messenger bag heavy against her hip, and tried not to touch anything. "Mr. Whitmore will see you now." The assistant's voice was glacier cold, her expression suggesting that art therapists ranked somewhere below delivery personnel in the building's social hierarchy. Iris had dealt with difficult parents before. 7 years working with children who couldn't speak their trauma out loud had taught her patience. But Alexander Whitmore's reputation preceded him. Tech mogul, venture capitalist, the man who'd revolutionized data security and made his first billion before 30. The tabloids loved his rare public appearances. The business magazines loved his quarterly earnings. Nobody seemed to love him. She stepped through the doorway and saw him standing at the windows, backlit by that relentless autumn sun. Tall, exactly as the photos suggested, but photographs couldn't capture the rigid set of his shoulders or the way his hands were clenched behind his back. He didn't turn around. "Miss Shaw." His voice was low, controlled. "I received your message. I don't appreciate being summoned. I asked for a meeting." She moved into the room, letting the door close behind her with a soft click. "About Theo's progress." "His progress is why I pay your center $40,000 per quarter." He turned then, and she saw his face properly for the first time. Sharp features, gray eyes that assessed and calculated. Handsome in the way of men who'd never had to think about it. "I assume that buys results without requiring my personal involvement." Iris set her bag on one of the chrome chairs facing his desk. "It buys my professional expertise, which is currently telling me that your son needs more than weekly sessions." Something flickered across his expression. Annoyance, maybe, or the kind of impatience men like him wore when challenged. He moved to his desk, putting that massive expanse of polished glass between them. "I'm very busy, Miss Shaw. If you have concerns, put them in your monthly report." "I did. You didn't read it." She pulled her bag open, drawing out the blue sketchbook she'd been carrying everywhere for the past 3 weeks. "I need you to look at something." "I don't have time." "Make time." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she'd spent the entire subway ride from the Upper West Side preparing for this moment. She'd rehearsed gentle approaches, diplomatic language, all the professional distance she was supposed to maintain. Then she'd remembered Theo yesterday, sitting in the corner of her therapy room, drawing the same image over and over with increasingly violent strokes of charcoal. "Please." That last word seemed to catch him off guard. He glanced at the sketchbook, then at her, his jaw tight. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse, send her away with the kind of threat his assistant had implied was coming. Instead, he said, "Show me." Thursday arrived with autumn rain that turned the city silver and blurred. Iris stood at her studio windows at 5:15, watching water stream down the glass, and tried to convince herself that the nervous flutter in her stomach was professional concern about the session and nothing more. The elevator chimed. Alexander stepped out exactly on time, carrying 2 coffees and wearing jeans that actually looked worn in, a forest green Henley that brought out the gray in his eyes. His hair was damp from the rain. "Thought you might need this." He handed her one of the coffees. Patricia texted. "Theo's excited. Apparently he's been drawing all week." "That's good." She accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing briefly. Sustained creative expression between sessions shows real progress. "Does the therapist always talk like a textbook?" His mouth quirked. "Or is that just for difficult parents?" "Just for you." She led him to the table where she'd set up tonight's materials. Special treatment. They worked together, setting out supplies, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. When Theo arrived 10 minutes later, he ran straight to his father, who caught him with practiced ease. "Hey, buddy, ready to draw?" "I made you something." Theo pulled a folded paper from his pocket, handing it to Alexander with careful ceremony. "At home." Alexander unfolded it slowly. A drawing of the brownstone, but different this time. The house was still there, but next to it, Theo had drawn something new, a tall building with many windows. The penthouse. And connecting them, a golden thread drawn in careful lines. "What's this?" Alexander's voice was rough. "The before place and the now place." Theo pointed to the thread. "But we're connected. You promised." Alexander pulled his son close, pressing his face to Theo's hair. When he looked up, his eyes found irises across the table. In his gaze, she saw gratitude, vulnerability, and something else, something warmer that made her breath catch. "We're connected," he agreed. "Always." Theo climbed into his chair, already reaching for supplies. "Can we draw it together? The thread? Make it stronger?" "Yeah." Alexander sat beside his son, not across from him this time, but side by side. "We can make it as strong as you need it to be." They bent over the paper together, father and son, their hands moving in tandem. Iris watched them work, the late evening light fighting through rain-streaked windows, and felt something shift in her chest. This was why she did this work. These moments when broken things found their way back to whole. Alexander looked up, catching her watching. His expression held a question, an invitation, something that made her heart kick against her ribs. She moved to sit across from them, picking up her own pencil. "Mind if I join you?" Theo beamed. "We're making a family picture. You should be in it too." "Theo," Alexander started, but Iris was already drawing herself into their picture, adding a small figure beside the golden thread. Alexander's eyes held hers as they drew together, and in that look, she read a promise that had nothing to do with therapy or healing or professional boundaries. A promise that maybe, just maybe, some connections could grow into something neither of them had planned for, but both of them needed. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, in a converted warehouse studio in the West 80s, 3 people drew their way toward something new. Patricia arrived at 7:30 to collect Theo. The boy was calmer now, his earlier storm passed, but he gripped Alexander's hand tightly as they walked to the elevator. "I'll see you tomorrow morning," Alexander said, "and tomorrow night, and every night after. Promise?" "Promise." He squeezed Theo's hand. "And if I mess up, you tell Miss Shaw and she'll yell at me again." Theo's eyes widened. "She yelled at you?" "Absolutely terrifying." Alexander glanced at Iris with something that might have been amusement. "Very scary woman." Theo giggled, a sound so unexpected that both adults froze. Then he giggled again, his whole face transforming. The elevator arrived. Patricia led Theo inside, but the boy turned back at the last moment. Dad? Yeah, buddy? I'm glad you came. The doors closed before Alexander could respond. He stood staring at the brushed steel for a long moment, his hands still raised in a half-wave. That was good, Iris said quietly. What you did in there. I said terrible things. He turned to face her. Made promises I don't know if I can keep. Then you'll learn how to keep them. She moved to start cleaning up the studio, gathering scattered art supplies. That's what the next few months are for. Few months? He followed her, helping without being asked. How long is this going to take? However long it takes. She wiped charcoal dust from the table. Healing doesn't follow a schedule, Mr. Whitmore. Alexander. The correction came out quiet. If you're going to yell at me regularly, you might as well use my first name. She looked up, startled. His expression was different now, still guarded, still controlled, but something had shifted. A wall lowered, maybe, or a door opened just slightly. Alexander, she tested. The name felt strange in her mouth, too intimate for the professional distance she was supposed to maintain. You should go. Your son will be waiting. He's going to bed in an hour. I have time. For what? To help you clean up. You picked up Theo's abandoned drawings, handling them with careful respect. And to apologize for threatening you yesterday. Iris paused in wiping down the easel. You didn't actually threaten me. I implied significant consequences if you interfered in my parenting. He gathered charcoal pencils with surprising efficiency. That's corporate speak for a threat. I've dealt with worse from parents who felt less guilty. She moved to the supply shelves, organizing what he handed her. At least you showed up. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought there was a 70% chance your assistant would call with an excuse. Iris turned to face him. I'm glad I was wrong. They stood close in the narrow aisle between shelves, and she was suddenly aware of how the evening light slanted through the windows, catching dust motes and turning everything golden. Of how much taller he was, how his charcoal-stained shirt made him look more human than his expensive suits. What made you fight for him? Alexander's voice had gone soft. Most therapists would have documented concerns and moved on. Most therapists didn't see him draw that last picture. She met his eyes. The one where he's standing alone on the steps. That wasn't just loneliness, Alexander. That was a child losing hope. And you couldn't let that happen. Could you? Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. No, I couldn't. They stood like that for a moment, the studio settling into evening quiet around them. Iris became aware of her pulse, of the way her hands wanted to reach for something, straighten his collar, brush charcoal dust from his shoulder, any excuse to close the small distance between them. She stepped back deliberately. You should go. Theo needs consistency, and that starts with you being home when you say you will. Right. He moved toward the elevator, then stopped. Thursday. Same time? Same time. She followed him, maintaining professional distance. And Alexander? Bring drawing supplies to the penthouse. Keep them on the kitchen table where Theo can see them, where he knows you can see them. Kitchen table art station. Got it. He pressed the elevator button, and they waited in comfortable silence until it arrived. Thank you, Iris. The use of her first name sent warmth through her chest. For yelling at you? For caring enough to yell. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside, turning to face her. Most people just take my money and tell me what I want to hear. I'm not most people. I'm beginning to realize that. The doors started to close, and his last words drifted through the narrowing gap. See you Thursday. Alexander moved past Iris before she could stop him, dropping to his knees in front of his son. Theo turned, surprised, and suddenly they were eye level. Father and son, equal height for once. I'm sorry. Alexander's voice came out raw. I'm so sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough. Like work was more important. Theo stared at him, tears still streaming down his small face. The truth is, you scare me. Alexander's hands hovered near Theo's shoulders, not quite touching. You're 7 years old, and you're braver than I've ever been. You speak your truth even when it's hard, or you draw it, which is even more powerful. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be vulnerable or present or any of the things Miss Shaw is trying to teach me. But I want to learn. He finally let his hands settle on Theo's shoulders, gentle, tentative. If you'll help me. If you'll show me how. Theo's arms tightened around himself. You'll just leave again. I might mess up. Alexander's voice cracked. Probably will mess up. But I won't leave. Not really. Not anymore. Promise? The word was so small, so hopeful that Iris felt tears prick her own eyes. I promise. Alexander pulled Theo into a hug, awkward and tight. I promise. I'll try. Theo stood rigid for a moment, then his arms unwrapped from around himself and circled his father's neck. He buried his face in Alexander's shoulder and sobbed, the kind of crying that sounded like it had been building for years. Alexander held him, one hand cupping the back of Theo's head, and looked at Iris over his son's shaking shoulders. His own eyes were wet, his expression shattered and rebuilding simultaneously. What do I do? He mouthed. This, she mouthed back. Just this. 20 minutes later, Theo had cried himself into exhaustion. He sat in his father's lap, something Iris suspected hadn't happened in years, with his head on Alexander's chest and his sketchbook clutched between them. Alexander's shirt was streaked with charcoal dust and tears. He didn't seem to notice or care. Can we go to the brownstone? Theo's voice was hoarse. Just to see it. It's not ours anymore. Alexander's hand moved in slow circles on Theo's back. Another family lives there. Oh. The disappointment was palpable. Iris moved closer, crouching beside them. But you could draw it together. Create your own version, something new. Theo lifted his head, looking at his father uncertainly. Would you draw with me? At home? Yes. Alexander didn't hesitate. Every day, if you want. Really? Really. He adjusted Theo so they were looking at each other. I'll come home for dinner. Every night. No more late meetings unless it's an emergency. What's an emergency? Good question. Alexander's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. Let's figure that out together. Theo leaned back against his father's chest, seeming to test if this was real, if he could trust it. Miss Shaw says art is a language. She's right. Alexander looked at Iris. I'm starting to understand that. You could learn more. Iris pulled her phone out, navigating to a website. There are parent-child art classes at the community center near your building, Saturday mornings. She showed him the screen. His expression flickered with something that might have been panic. That's very public. That's the point. She lowered the phone. Theo needs to see you choosing him in front of other people, not just in private. People will photograph it, make comments. Let them. She met his gaze steadily. Show Theo that he's more important than what strangers think. Alexander looked down at his son, who was watching this exchange with careful attention. What do you think? Want to take art classes with your old man? Theo nodded immediately, hope blazing across his small face. Then we'll do it. Alexander's voice was firm. Starting this Saturday. PNG. Theo pushed away from the table suddenly, the chair scraping loud against the floor. He grabbed his sketchbook, clutching it to his chest, backing toward the windows. Theo! Alexander started to rise. Don't! Iris put a hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. Give him space. I shouldn't have said that. Alexander's voice cracked. I pushed too hard. You told the truth. Iris moved toward Theo slowly, non-threatening. Sometimes truth is scary. The boy stood pressed against the glass, his reflection ghostly in the darkening window. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Theo, Iris crouched a few feet away, giving him room. Want to tell us what you're feeling? He shook his head violently. Want to draw it instead? A pause, then a small nod. Iris gestured to the easel near the window. Use whatever you need. Theo moved to it, still clutching his sketchbook. He set it aside carefully, then picked up a thick piece of charcoal. His hand moved across the fresh paper in violent strokes, nothing careful or controlled. Dark lines slashing across white, chaos and emotion made visible. Alexander watched from the table, his own drawing abandoned. What is he processing? Iris stayed near Theo, but not too close. Let him work. The drawing that emerged was abstract at first, just darkness and motion. But slowly, shapes began to resolve. The brownstone again, but this time distorted, broken. Figures separated by walls, empty spaces where connections should be. Theo's hand moved faster, the charcoal grinding down to nothing. He grabbed another piece, kept drawing. The paper tore under the force of his strokes. He didn't stop. Theo! Alexander was on his feet now, moving toward his son. Theo, please! The boy whirled, holding the charcoal like a weapon. His face was streaked with tears and charcoal dust. His mouth opened, and after 3 months of silence, he spoke. You left me. The words hung in the studio's vast space, small and enormous all at once. Alexander stopped mid-stride like he'd hit a physical wall. I didn't. His voice failed. I'm right here. You left. Theo's hands were shaking, charcoal dust falling like ash. You went away and never came back. I'm here every morning. No! The word came out fierce, strong, despite the tears. You're there. The office, the meetings, the phone. You're never really home. Alexander looked at Iris desperately. She moved closer to Theo, her hand hovering near his shoulder but not touching. Tell him what you need. Theo's charcoal fell from his fingers. He wrapped his arms around himself, suddenly small again. I need him to stay. Like before. In the brownstone. I can't, Alexander started. Why not? Theo's voice rose. Why can't you just stay home sometimes? Because I have responsibilities. The company. You always choose the company. Theo turned back to his ruined drawing, his voice dropping. You always choose everything else. Alexander's face went white. He looked at Iris. Is that what he thinks? That I'm choosing other things over him? Are you? The question came out harder than she intended. Choosing other things? I'm providing for him, building a future. He doesn't need a future. Iris stepped between them, forcing Alexander to look at her. He needs a father. Now, Today, in the messy, inconvenient present. I don't know how to be what he needs. The admission came out broken. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Then learn. She moved closer, aware of Theo behind her, aware of this moment's fragility. Figure it out. That's what parents do. What if I fail? You're already failing. The brutal honesty made him flinch. But at least if you try, you're failing together. I remember that place. Alexander's voice had lost its executive polish, going rough around the edges. We moved there right after. He stopped. You were very small. Theo's pencil resumed moving, but Iris noticed the subtle shift in his posture. He was listening. Your mother hated it. Alexander picked up a pencil, held it awkwardly. Said it was too small, too old. Not what she'd signed up for when she married me. Iris wanted to redirect the conversation away from his ex-wife, but something kept her silent. This was the most natural Alexander had sounded since she'd met him. But I liked it. He started sketching without seeming to notice he'd begun, rough lines that suggested the brownstone's facade. The company was smaller then. I could walk to the office, come home for lunch. Theo's pencil stopped moving entirely now. He stared at his father's drawing, watching the familiar structure take shape under unpracticed hands. You'd wait by the door. Alexander's pencil moved faster, adding details, the window boxes, the iron railing. Every day at noon. Patricia would have your lunch ready, but you wouldn't eat until I got there. A small sound escaped Theo's throat. Not quite a word, but close. Alexander's pencil stuttered, leaving a dark mark across the paper. I stopped coming home for lunch when we moved to the penthouse. He set the pencil down, staring at his incomplete drawing. The commute was longer, more meetings. I thought, his jaw worked. I thought you'd adjust. Iris felt her throat tighten. This wasn't how she'd planned the session, but something real was happening, something necessary. Theo, she said softly, do you want to show your dad what you drew? The boy looked at her, then at his father, then slowly turned his sketchbook around. The brownstone, rendered in such perfect detail it could have been a photograph, and in the window, two figures, one large, one small. Together. Alexander's breath caught audibly. That's... Alexander reached toward the drawing, stopped himself. Is that... us? Theo nodded. The smallest movement, but definite. In the kitchen window. Alexander's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. When I was working and you were drawing. Another nod. Iris watched Alexander's hands curl into fists on the table, watched him struggle with something that looked like it might break him apart. Can I? He cleared his throat. Can I try to draw it? The kitchen? Theo's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something that might have been hope. Alexander pulled a fresh sheet toward him, picked up the charcoal with unsteady fingers. His first lines were uncertain, amateur, but he kept going. The outline of the table, two chairs, the window behind. He drew with the intense focus she imagined he brought to board meetings, to business deals, except here the stakes were infinitely higher. The light came from the east, he said, more to himself than them. Morning light. You liked sitting where you could see it. He added shading to suggest that light, his technique clumsy but his intent clear. Theo leaned forward slightly, watching. And I sat here. Alexander sketched a figure at the table, rough, barely more than a shape, but recognizably adult. With my laptop, taking calls, annoying you with my terrible coffee. Theo's pencil moved. He started adding to his own drawing, details to the kitchen scene, small refinements. Father and son working in parallel, not quite together, but not quite separate anymore. Iris felt something loosen in her chest. This was why she did this work. These moments when art bridged what words couldn't. "I miss it too," Alexander said quietly. "That kitchen. Those mornings." Theo's hand stilled. He looked up at his father directly for the first time since the session started. His gray eyes, exactly like Alexander's, were bright with unshed tears. "I miss you," Alexander whispered. Alexander moved through the studio like a man assessing a business acquisition, cataloging details, measuring value, finding weaknesses. He stopped at her main desk, where she kept her private files and the children's most recent work. "This is where you see all your clients?" He picked up a child's watercolor painting that was drying on the corner of the desk. "It's very unstructured." Iris rescued the painting before he could accidentally smudge it. "That's intentional. Art therapy works best in spaces that don't feel clinical. It feels chaotic. It feels creative." She set the painting safely aside, "Which is exactly what Theo needs." He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets. From this height they could see the Hudson River, the same view as his office, but from a different angle, less commanding, more intimate. "Ground rules," she said, pulling his attention back. "No phones during sessions, no checking email, no taking calls. For an hour I can manage that. No criticizing his work, no directing what he creates, no asking him to explain what things mean." She moved to stand beside him, both of them watching the darkening river. "He leads. You observe. You participate if he invites you. Otherwise, you just be present." "Be present," he tested the phrase. "As opposed to what I usually do?" "As opposed to managing him like a project with deliverables." She glanced at him. "Can you do that?" Before he could answer, the elevator chimed again. They both turned. The doors opened, and Theo stepped out, his nanny's hand on his shoulder. He wore his usual soft blue shirt, jeans, the ever-present sketchbook tucked under his arm. Then he saw his father. The sketchbook hit the floor. Theo froze, his gray eyes, so like Alexander's, going wide with something that looked terrifyingly close to fear. "Theo." Alexander's voice came out too formal, too controlled. "Hello?" The boy didn't respond. His gaze darted from his father to Iris to the nanny, looking for an explanation, an escape route, anything that made sense of this violation of routine. Iris moved forward slowly, crouching to pick up the fallen sketchbook. "Hey, Theo. Remember how we talked about trying something different today?" He nodded, barely. His hands were trembling. "Your dad is going to join us for our session." She kept her voice calm, steady, the same tone she used when children were on the edge of panic. "He wants to see what we do here." Theo's eyes tracked to Alexander, then away. His nanny, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, squeezed his shoulder gently. "I'll be downstairs if you need me, sweetie." The elevator doors closed behind her, and suddenly it was just the three of them in the cavernous studio. The silence stretched taut and fragile. Alexander took a step forward. Theo took a step back. "Maybe," Alexander stopped, looked at Iris helplessly. "I don't know what to do." "Sit." IRC gestured to the low table she'd set up with art supplies. "Both of you. We're going to draw together." Theo moved to the table with obvious reluctance, choosing the seat farthest from where his father would sit. He opened his sketchbook to a blank page, picked up a charcoal pencil with fingers that still trembled slightly. Alexander lowered himself into the chair across from his son with the careful movements of someone approaching a wild animal. His long legs barely fit under the child-sized table. "I haven't drawn anything since college." Good. Iris set fresh paper in front of him, laid out pencils, and curled. Then you won't have expectations. She pulled up a stool, positioning herself where she could see both of their faces. Theo, what would you like to draw today? The boy's pencil moved immediately, consonant strokes despite his trembling hands. The brownstone began to take shape on his paper, rendered with the same careful detail as always. Alexander watched his son draw, and Iris watched Alexander. Saw the moment recognition hit, saw his jaw tighten, his shoulders draw up. The brownstone, he said quietly. Theo's pencil paused mid-stroke. He didn't look up. He walked her to the door, an unexpected gesture that required him to cross the office beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed, close enough that she caught that dark cologne again and felt heat crawl up her neck. Miss Shaw. He stopped with his hand on the door handle, not opening it yet. What if I can't give him what he needs? The vulnerability in the question caught her off guard. For a moment, the powerful executive vanished and she saw someone younger underneath, someone uncertain. Then we figure out what you can give him. She adjusted her bag strap. And we start there. He opened the door. Claire looked up from her desk, her expression flickering with surprise at seeing them together, at the sketchbook visible in Iris's bag, at whatever she read in her employer's face. Claire, Miss Shaw will be here Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5:30. Alexander's voice had regained its executive edge. Add her to the permanent visitor list, and clear my evenings accordingly. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. Claire was already typing, her manicured nails clicking across the keyboard. Will she need parking validation? I take the subway, Iris said. Both Claire and Alexander looked at her like she'd confessed to arriving by unicycle. The subway. Alexander repeated it slowly. From the Upper West Side. It's faster than sitting in traffic. She moved toward the elevator, aware of his gaze following her. And it gives me time to prepare session notes. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. She stepped inside, turning to face him. He remained in his doorway, backlit by his wall of windows, the city spread out behind him like a kingdom he ruled alone. Tuesday, she said. 5:30. Don't be late. The doors slid closed before he could respond. The Riverside Children's Therapy Center occupied a converted warehouse in the West 80s, all exposed brick and industrial windows flooding the space with natural light. Iris's studio took up the entire third floor, easels arranged in comfortable clusters, shelves overflowing with art supplies, beanbag chairs positioned near the windows for children who needed to retreat. She arrived Tuesday at 4, giving herself 90 minutes to prepare. Not that there was much to prepare. Her approach was deliberately unstructured, letting children guide their own therapeutic process through art. But having Alexander Whitmore in her space required mental preparation at minimum. Big night! Maya, her colleague, appeared in the doorway with 2 paper cups of coffee. The infamous Billionaire graces us with his presence. He's not infamous. Iris accepted the coffee gratefully. He's just terrifying? Maya dropped into one of the beanbags. I looked him up. His Wikipedia page has a section called Controversies that needs a scroll bar. He's Theo's father, that's what matters. Theo's father who threatened to sue the school district when they suggested his son needed additional support. Maya sipped her coffee. Theo's father who, according to the intake notes, only agreed to therapy after his lawyer advised it would look better in custody proceedings. There aren't custody proceedings. Iris had read the file thoroughly. His ex-wife lives in Los Angeles with her new family. She sees Theo twice a year. Which means he has sole responsibility for that sweet, silent little boy. Maya's voice softened. And he outsourced it to us. Iris couldn't argue with that assessment. She'd seen too many wealthy parents treat therapy as another service to purchase, another problem to delegate. But she'd also seen the way Alexander's hands had trembled when he held Theo's sketchbook, the way his voice had cracked when he asked, "What if I can't give him what he needs?" "He's trying," she said finally, in his own dysfunctional way. At 5:15, the elevator chimed. Iris looked up from arranging art supplies, expecting her next client. Instead, Alexander stepped out, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that somehow made him look more intimidating than the custom suits. "You're early," she said. "I'm never late." He moved into the studio, his gaze sweeping across the organized chaos. "Where's Theo?" "His nanny brings him at 5:30. I wanted to talk to you first." His office phone buzzed. He ignored it. The intercom buzzed. He ignored that too. Instead, he moved back to where she stood by the windows, stopping close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the silver threading through the dark hair at his temples. "You think you know me?" His voice had dropped lower, intimate in a way that felt dangerous. "Based on what? Magazine profiles? Therapy sessions with my son?" "I know what Theo shows me." Iris forced herself not to step back, even though every instinct screamed that this proximity was unprofessional. "And right now, he's showing me a father he's desperate to connect with and terrified to disappoint." "He has no reason to be terrified of me." "Doesn't he?" She gestured around the pristine office. "This is your world. Chrome and glass and perfection. Where does a 7-year-old fit in here?" "He doesn't come to my office." "Exactly." The word hung between them. "He doesn't come here. You don't go there. You exist in separate orbits, Mr. Whitmore, and he's trying to tell you that it's breaking him." Alexander's hand came up, and for a moment she thought he might touch her, push her back, grip her shoulder, something. Instead, his fingers curled into a fist at his side. "You're awfully certain about a child you've known for 3 months. "I'm certain about what I see in his drawings." Iris pulled her phone out again, navigating to her photos. "And certain about what happened yesterday that made me insist on this meeting." She turned the screen toward him. The photo showed a drawing, but not like the others. This one was darker, the charcoal pressed so hard it had torn the paper in places. The same brownstone, but this time a figure stood on the steps, small, alone, looking up at windows that were empty and dark. Alexander stared at the image. His throat worked, but no sound came out. The late afternoon light caught on his profile, highlighting the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders had gone rigid. "He drew this for 40 minutes straight," Iris said quietly. "Wouldn't stop until the paper shredded. Then he started crying." Crying. He repeated it like the word was foreign. "The first real emotion I've seen from him in 3 months. She pulled the phone back, pocketing it. "And then he looked at me and said, 'He's never coming back.'" Alexander turned away sharply, both hands coming up to grip the back of his neck. He stood like that for a long moment, the skyline blazing orange and gold behind him, and Iris watched his breathing slow and deepen as he fought for control. "I don't." He stopped, started again. "I'm not absent. I see him every morning at breakfast." "For how long?" Iris kept her voice gentle now, sensing the crack in his armor. 10 minutes? 15? "He has school. I have work." "And in the evenings?" "He has homework, dinner with his nanny, bedtime at 8:30. He dropped his hands, turning back to face her. "A routine. Stability. Everything the family therapist recommended after the divorce." "Routine isn't connection." Iris moved closer to the desk where the sketchbook still lay. And stability without presence is just another word for loneliness. You're making it sound like I'm neglecting him. I'm saying he's lonely in a penthouse full of people. She picked up the sketchbook, held it between them again. And he's telling you the only way he knows how. Through these. Alexander's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, the screen lighting up with notifications, the outside world demanding his attention, then deliberately turned it face down on the desk. The first session, Tuesday. What happens? You show up. Iris allowed herself a small exhale of relief. Bring casual clothes. My studio gets messy. Casual. He said it like she'd suggested he arrive naked. Jeans and a t-shirt, Mr. Whitmore. Whatever you wear when you're not trying to intimidate board members. She tucked the sketchbook back into her bag. And bring an open mind. Theo leads the sessions. We follow. I don't follow. I lead. Not in my studio. She slung her bag over her shoulder, meeting his eyes with steady determination. There, you're just Theo's father, and he gets to show you what that means to him. Iris moved around the desk before she could second-guess the impulse. Personal space existed for people like Alexander Whitmore in carefully measured increments, handshakes at prescribed distances, boardroom arrangements that kept subordinates at bay. She violated all of it by stepping close enough to smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, and laying the sketchbook open on the glass surface between them. Theo drew this yesterday. Her voice steadier now, falling into the professional rhythm she used with parents. And last week, and the week before. The drawing showed a house. Not the Whitmore penthouse on the Upper East Side that architectural magazines had featured, but something smaller, older. A brownstone with a red door and window boxes, rendered in careful detail, the brickwork shaded with patient cross-hatching, the windows reflecting sky. Alexander stared at it. His hands remained at his sides, but she watched his fingers curl slowly into his palms. He has a good memory. He was 4 when you lived there. Iris turned the page. Another house, same structure, different season. Snow on the steps. This isn't just memory. This is longing. He's 7 years old. Children that age don't experience... He stopped himself, jaw working. Don't experience what? She turned another page. The house again, this time with a figure in the window. Small, pressed against the glass. Complex emotional landscapes. Because I can show you 30 more drawings that suggest otherwise. He reached out, fingers hovering over the page, then withdrew. Where is this going, Miss Shaw? Where it needs to go. Iris turned through the sketchbook methodically, letting him see the progression. The house in spring with flowers blooming, the house at night with one window lit, the house in rain with water pooling on the sidewalk. Theo doesn't speak during our sessions. He draws. This is his language, and he's trying to tell you something. Then tell me. The words came out rougher than before, frustration bleeding through that controlled exterior. That's what I'm paying you for, to translate. I can interpret. She met his eyes, refusing to step back even though her pulse was hammering. But some things require more than interpretation. They require response. Alexander moved away from the desk, putting distance between himself and the sketchbook like it might contaminate him. He stopped at the windows, staring down at the city 53 floors below. From this angle, Iris could see the tension in his spine, the way his shoulders held themselves too straight. The brownstone was temporary, he said finally. We lived there 6 months while the penthouse was being renovated. He couldn't possibly remember it with this kind of detail. Children remember what matters to them. Iris stayed by the desk, keeping the drawings visible in her peripheral vision. And they remember the people they were with. His reflection in the glass showed a tightening around his mouth. His mother left when he was 5. If these drawings are about her, they're not about her. Iris picked up the sketchbook, flipped to a page near the end. This drawing showed the brownstone's interior, a kitchen with morning light slanting across a small table, 2 chairs, 2 bowls, 2 spoons. They're about you. That's absurd. He turned from the window and the late afternoon sun caught the sharp planes of his face. I provide everything he needs. Private school, security, the best medical care. He needs you. The interruption hung in the air between them, too blunt, too direct for this glass tower and this man who'd built empires on controlled precision. Not your money. You. Something dangerous flickered in his gray eyes. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. You've been working with my son for 3 months. I've been his father for 7 years. Don't presume to tell me what he needs. Iris didn't retreat. Then why did you hire me? Because the school psychologist suggested therapy after he stopped speaking in class. And you thought you could outsource his healing. She kept her voice level, professional, even as her heart kicked against her ribs. Pay someone to fix whatever broke inside him. Nothing is broken. His jaw clenched. He's adjusting. To what? She held up the sketchbook between them. To living in a museum? To having a father who schedules him like a business meeting?